Hi and welcome to another Watch Geek video. Today I'll be doing a review of another Seiko 5 that joined my collection recently, and it's the SNX 111. If you don't have the time nor the will to listen to me ramble for about 20 minutes, you can use the time codes in the description to jump to specific parts of the video. Now, I usually borrow watches from my friends and forum members when I'm doing these reviews and tutorials. Sometimes I'll even buy a watch exclusively to do a review of it and then try to resell it and get at least some money back so I can fund another purchase. However, this watch is none of those cases. This is a watch I bought for myself to use as a daily wear. However, upon receiving it, I noticed some details that I really liked, and also that combined with the fact that there are only two other videos of this watch online, and they're both from a watch from a dealer, so they're only showing the watch, not saying anything about it. I just decided to do a review because I believe this model does deserve a full review, as I find it to be one of the best designed and most beautiful Seiko 5s out there. Now, this beauty is also one of the reasons why I'm very happy that this watch is going to be the first one where I'm going to use some new equipment that's going to allow me to do more close-up shots from now on. So it will hopefully reveal more details and show watches in a better light. So please leave your opinion in the comment section whether you like this or not. Now, when it comes to the watch itself and the specs, it's 37.5 millimeters in diameter with a lug-to-lug of 43.2, and a thickness is 11.2. So it's a pretty compact watch and a pretty compact case. It comes in at 85 grams, so it is pretty light as well. It comes with a flat Hardlex crystal, and the water resistance, it just says water resistant. It has no depth rating, meaning theoretically that it's only splash resistant. However, from my personal experience with Seiko 5 watches, you can take it swimming no problems, because I've been using my SNK for years like that. So their water resistance is pretty underrated. It also is powered by the 7S26 movement, but I'll cover that in more details later on. Now, it comes on a 19 millimeter bracelet that tapers down to 16 millimeters at the clasp. It's an oyster style bracelet, and I have to admit that it's one of the cheapest bracelets I've ever handled in my life. This also confirms one thing that I read from one forum member, where he claimed that Seiko 5s are $500 watches with 50-cent bracelets, and I have to admit that I agree. Now, there are different tiers of bracelets on the market, and I hopefully will do a video in the future describing the differences between each tiers. But I can tell you right away that this watch is going to represent the lowest tier possible. Now, there are different parts of the bracelet, but for this example, I'm just going to divide this bracelet into three main parts. So you have the end link, which connects the bracelet to the case. Then you have the links themselves that make the bracelet, and you have the clasp that's used to open and close the bracelet. Now, each one of these parts can be made in a cheaper or more expensive way. And so let's say an end link can be hollow, or it can be a solid piece of metal. The same goes for the links, and also the clasp that can be stamped or machined. Now, manufacturers are usually going to combine different quality levels for different parts of the bracelet. So let's say many entry-level Seikos are going to have a solid links for the bracelet so that you have the feeling of quality. However, it's going to have hollow end links or stamped clasps so they can cut cost. And these are things that normal people are not going to notice or care about, unlike us, WIS people. However, on this bracelet, they didn't even try, so everything is made in the cheapest way possible. So you have a hollow end link that, as you can see, is just a folded piece of metal. The links are also folded, so they're not solid, and the clasp is stamped, and it's one of the cheapest clasps I've ever seen. Like, it doesn't even have a push button release that you find on many Seiko 5s. Instead, it just has a folded piece of metal that hooks onto the other part of the clasp, as you can see. Now, there's nothing wrong with this type of bracelet. I mean, even Rolex used to have this type of bracelet and the clasp. However, they did it in the 70s, and they kind of moved on. So this watch kind of looks like it's stuck in time. Since I knew what to expect from this bracelet, even before I bought the watch, I decided to ditch the bracelet and put it on a nice leather strap. However, I have to admit that after wearing it for a couple of days, I actually grew fond of this bracelet. Now it is cheap in execution, however it is very functional because it's very comfortable because of this drape. It has a nice drape on the wrist. Also the wrist breathes, unlike let's say some really tight and big bracelets where you get all sweaty. And the clasp, although pretty cheap and simple, is actually quite secure once you close it. So it does its job the way it was designed to. And also this bracelet hasn't pulled a single hair from my wrist in the whole month of wearing it. Now, would I buy an aftermarket option if there was one where you had solid end links, solid links, and a machine clasp? Yes, I would in a heartbeat, but I'm pretty happy wearing it as it is. Now, getting this exact model has proven to be a bit of a challenge. Why? Well, it's been discontinued a couple of years ago, so it was impossible to find it on regular channels like eBay and some other web stores where you can get a Seiko 5 for $50 to $80. So I had to turn to the last place where a Japanese watch lover can turn to when trying to find a discontinued model, and that's the Yahoo Auctions Japan. And sure enough, within a few days I found one new in box and the price was right, so I bought it. However, the thing with Yahoo Auctions Japan is that Japanese sellers are not going to deal with international buyers directly. So you have to employ companies that are going to purchase the watch for you, have it shipped to their warehouse, and then they repack it and ship it to you internationally. These are companies like Bai and Shopping Japan and such. Now, they're naturally going to charge you a fee for that, and they're going to charge you the international shipping. That kind of raises the price of the watch. Then when the watch arrives to your country, you're going to have to pay taxes and import duties and whatnot. And when it comes to my country, Croatia, they're going to make you feel like you bought a luxury item no matter how cheap the watch was. So although this watch, when I won it on the auction, I won it for $50, by the time it was on my wrist, it costed me $130. So that's quite a price increase. Now, I was more than willing to pay $130 for this because I got a watch that I really wanted for years. And it was my own fault for not buying it earlier when it was readily available. However, knowing that more than 150% of the price was in different fees and taxes does leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Now, you might think, why would you pay that much for a discontinued model when there are so many readily available models of Seiko 5s that are still in production for half the price that have the similar styling and coloring and everything? And you're right, there are. However, this one was the closest to being exactly what I wanted. So I did check some other models, but I would always find flaws in them. So some of the models that I checked were the SNK 41, which is the silver dial version of the Seiko 5 that was made famous by the Hodinky article about a $75 watch that looks like $1 million. And although that watch is beautiful, and I have it right here because I'm going to try to use it for a mod, and it's very similar to, it's like the closest that you can get to a Grand Seiko when it comes to Seiko 5s. However, I did not like the Daphne hands because I was more into these stick hands when I decided to buy this watch. The second candidate was the SNX S73 that has stick hands, and it has those wonderful large loomed markers. However, the problem with that model was that the hands were a bit too short for my taste, and also the case was a bit weird because it was really straight. It had no curvature to it, and the case back is really thick on that one. And the third candidate was the SNK 355, which I believe is the modern successor to this model. And although it's very beautiful and I actually liked it, when I went to try it, I found two big flaws of that model. The first one is that the dial is covered in little Seiko 5 logos. Now, I'm a big fan of Seiko 5 and I especially like the 5 logo. However, even for me, that was a bit too much because you had a lot of them. And when I went to try it in person, like the 5 logos were really noticeable, more than on the photos. Also, the second problem of that watch was the legibility. Like the hands and the markers would simply disappear and blend with the dial. And this brings us to probably the main reason why I chose this model, and that's the way they handled the legibility issue. Now, when you have silver markers and hands, you're going to have legibility issues, especially on a silver dial. So the way you can handle it, to increase legibility, you use beveling. So there are many levels of it, but the simplest way is to use a two-sided beveling. So that way, hands and markers are going to look like like a sword blade. Like you have a raised center and then you have like sides that are sloping downwards. That way, a watch will reflect the light at different angles, and that way you're going to eliminate the disappearing hands that you sometimes get on flat hands and flat markers, especially on darker dials. Now, the second level of that beveling is when you have alternating finish. So let's say you're going to polish one side of the bevel and the other is going to be brushed. That way, not only do you reflect light at different angles, but you also reflect different types of light, because one finish is going to reflect light better at very light conditions, while the other is going to take over when things get dim. And then you have the third, which is three-sided beveling with alternating finish. This is something that you can see on Grand Seiko models, where you have the top of the hands polished, finely brushed, and you have the sides finely polished. That way, the watch becomes legible in almost all conditions except total darkness. And then we come to this model. Now, on this model, they also used three-sided beveling. However, and the sides are polished. However, the top is not brushed, but instead it has black paint on it. So the markers and hands are painted on. That way you have very, very high contrast between the hands and the dial, and they're always visible. There isn't a lighting situation where you won't be able to see these hands, and that is what I like really a lot about this model. Now you might say I'm crazy for paying that much money just to get some black paint on the hands and on the markers, but it's not just that. I mean, with this watch, the case shape, the dial, the hands shape and the length, and also the legibility, just everything came together with this model. And so it was well worth the price that I paid. And also, when you get into little details that this watch has, like, it really justifies its price. Now, there are models of watches that appear very expensive from afar, from a distance. However, when you get up and close, you realize they're not really that great. Well, this watch is the exact opposite. Now, this watch from afar is going to appear very generic and very cheap. However, when you get into little details, it really amazes you. And that's one thing that's great about buying a cheap watch, is that usually it can easily exceed your expectations because you have them set low. And even if you find an imperfection, like let's say the bracelet on this model, you can forgive it because you paid very little for it. But this also works in reverse when it comes to really expensive watches. So they can easily disappoint you because, well, you can set your expectations too high. And also, it's very hard to forgive an imperfection on a watch that you paid a couple of $1,000s for it. This watch luckily exceeded my expectations in every possible way. Like I said, even the bracelet. So I'm really happy with it. Now, when it comes to these details that amazed me and the things that I liked about this watch, the first one is the dial. Now, this dial is a sunburst effect. However, it has this milky shine to it. It's more white than silver, let's say, compared to the SNKL. And also, this sunburst effect appears like it's on a transparent layer that's above the dial. So you have this depth that's very hard to record or photograph, but in real life, it really plays with the light wonderfully. Then you have, I like that they kept the writing to minimum. So beside the Seiko and the 5 logo, you only have this automatic written in the bottom and nothing else. And I have to admit that the printing of the automatic is very crisp and almost flawless. And now, since I mentioned the logos, I have to admit that I was amazed by the Seiko logo and the shadow effect that it created. Now, you see, they raised the Seiko logo on 2 little feet, so it's hovering above the dial and casts a shadow down onto the dial. Now, that looks amazing by itself, but what's even more amazing is that usually Seiko does this on Grand Seiko models, and they even boast about it. So it's kind of weird they put it on a watch that costs less than a service of a GS. And even the Seiko 5, the 5 shield logo, which people usually hate, but I love it because it represents quality, and to me it's like a badge of honor. But not only that, but this seemingly simple logo is not really that simple. I mean, this etching around the 5, although to a naked eye it appears like normal etching, when you look at under a loupe or under a magnifying glass, you'll see that they made little horizontal grooves. Now, this is amazing by itself, but especially considering they put it on a cheap watch, when it's so hard to see with your naked eye. Then the hands and the markers, they're wonderfully finished and really nicely shaped, like with the beveling and the paint and everything. And they really showed that elegance and beauty can really go hand in hand with functionality and legibility. I especially love the second hand, although I would like it to be a bit longer, but it really is not just straight cut. It actually has a certain roundness to it. And to me, it reminds me of the hands of the IWC Portofino. So really, really classy. Now we get to the Lume, and the Lume is typical Seiko, which means that it's very functional and it's gonna allow you to see the time at any conditions. Now this is no Seiko monster, but considering that this watch is pretty dressy and considering the amount of lume that it has, the nighttime visibility is really respect worthy. I mean, it even has the standard Seiko where you walk into a dim room from the outside, and the lume is going to explode on your wrist. Now, the very same day when I got it, I went to bed with this strapped to my wrist and my SNK to my other wrist. And at 4 a.m. when I woke up, I was able to read the time perfectly of the SNX. Then I took a glance at my SNK, and although the lume on that one was a bit stronger, it was just by a little bit. And considering that one has modded hands with C3 lume and has a lot more lume on it, this was pretty impressive. And lastly, we come to the case. And the case, like I said, is classically proportioned and sized. However, it does have nice finishing for the price. So you have a polished bezel, and then you have this fine brushing on the top of the case and the lugs. And it's so fine that it appears like it's satin. And then you have the polished sides. However, the watch doesn't just go from top to the side. It actually has another additional bevel running across, and that one is polished as well. And this one gives character to the watch, and to me it's the favorite part of this case. Now this is also something that I did not notice on the online photos, but I noticed it once I got the watch. And then there is another bevel between the side and the case back, so it is a pretty complex case design considering the price. And now we lastly come to the movement. Like I said, it's powered by the 7S26 movement, which is a 21 joule automatic movement that has no hacking and no hand winding. Now this is a 21,600 beat per hour movement, and it has a 40-hour power reserve. It also comes with a day and date function, and it has a quick set function, meaning that when you pull it to the first click, turning it one way is going to change the date, while turning it the other is going to change the day of week. Now the day wheel on this watch is also bilingual, meaning that it comes with English language plus another language that depends on the market where the watch is sold. So this one comes with English and Spanish. However, you can have it with English and German or Japanese or even Arabic. Now, manufacturers are always going to tell you that on a mechanical watch, you must not change the dates or the day between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. because then the date mechanism is caught by the gears, and doing the change at that time, you can damage the mechanism permanently. However, the 7S26, despite being so cheap and simple as people like to call it, actually has a safety built in. So the part that catches on the date wheel actually has a springing action, so it can slip and move away when you do it in the forbidden hours. Now, I'm not telling you that you should change the date and day in the forbidden hours. However, you can have a peace of mind knowing that even if you do, let's say, forget about it and do it, then you're not going to damage your movement. Now, I adore 7S26 movements because I've had a couple over the years and I've never had a problem with any of them. However, the relationship with this one didn't really start that well. When I got it, I put it on my wrist, and within a couple of hours, it was like 20 minutes ahead. And I knew something was wrong. Now, I'm trying to imagine that a regular person would probably return the watch and write on every forum they could how Seiko is crap and everything. However, since I know the 7S26 movements, I knew it could only be one of two things. The first could be magnetism, meaning that the watch got magnetized in transport, and that would mean that I would have to take it to my watchmaker because I don't have the necessary tools to demagnetize it. Or secondly, it could be a tangled hairspring, which sometimes happens on the B and C variants of the 7S26 movement. And when I took a look in the back, using my loop, I really noticed that that it was the Tangled hairspring, because the balance wheel was moving really slow. Like, it had a very low amplitude, and I could actually see the hairspring jumped on itself. Now, the way you fix this, and although this method is being ridiculed on the forums lately, is you take the watch and you gently tap it against the palm of your hand, of your other hand. Now, I did this for a couple of times, each time increasing the force and checking the watch under the loop later on. And after the third and final tap, I didn't even have to use the loop, because I saw the balance wheel just sped up visibly. And then after I checked with the loop, I could see that the hairspring was untangled and it was working correctly. Now, then I reset the time and I wrote down the time difference between this and the atomic clock, and it was 15 seconds ahead. Now, I usually don't time my mechanical watches, at least not anymore, but I wanted to see if I fixed the issue and how this movement is going to perform, because it's new, like I haven't worn it yet. So anyways, for the next couple of days, I noticed that it was about 2 seconds, consistently about 2 seconds behind every day. So I kept wearing it, and after a month, I wrote down the difference, and it was 40 seconds behind the atomic clock, meaning that it lost like 55 seconds in a month. And that comes down to minus 1.8 seconds a day, which is pretty amazing. Now, the 7S26 movements can be really good at accuracy. However, there's a certain condition that has to be met, and it comes to the power reserve. Now, because these are cheap movements, their accuracy is very dependent on the level of the power reserve, and I'm talking from my personal experience. So if you have a large collection, if you wear these occasionally, and they don't wind all the way, or they're always somewhere in the middle, the accuracy can be all over the place. However, if you wear these watches consistently, or as an only watch, or like me, like I usually wear watches for up to 4 months in one rotation, their consistency and accuracy is going to be much better. Now, I'm not telling you that your 7S26 watch is going to be within a couple of seconds a day just by wearing it all the time. That's a draw of the luck, and I was really lucky with this one. But you're going to get consistency, and then if you regulate it, it's going to be a very accurate watch. Like my SNK and my Monster were nowhere near as accurate as this out of the box, but after my watchmaker regulated them, they were both within a couple of seconds a day. So the 7S26 with a topped out power reserve and worn constantly can really be a pretty good and accurate movement. Now, these 7S26 movements are now being replaced by the 4R generation of the movements, which add the hacking and hand winding that these movements lack. And although I would personally love to have a 4R movement, I don't think I'll be having one in the near future. Why? Well, because Seiko decided that all the new Seiko 5 models that have the 4R are ridiculously large for my wrist. So they're all 40 plus millimeters, and most of them are 44 plus. Now, I have a feeling like Seiko is now increasing the size of the Seiko 5s that were always between 36 and 39. Now, when the rest of the world is slowly coming back to smaller watches. Now, another YouTuber, Rich from What's on the Wrist, in his video Why the Rolex Datejust 36 is the perfect size now, also argues that the big watch trend is about to end, and that the manufacturers are slowly coming back to smaller watches. Now, I'll put a link in the corner so you can check his video. I really do hope that he's right. I mean, it's not that I don't like big watches, it's just that they look ridiculous on my wrist, and I don't have anything against them, but I wish manufacturers would just, when they issue new models, they should issue it in at least 2 sizes so that everyone can enjoy the same style of the watch. At least that's my hope, but I know it's not going to happen, because they're always going to produce in the size that sells the best. So now, since we're talking about wrist sizes and sizes of watches, I think we should conclude with a wrist shot to just show you why I think all watches should be made in different sizes. Because as you can see, although this is 37.5 and it's considered a very small size by today's standards, on my wrist it just looks perfect, and I love the way, like the proportions of the watch compared to the proportions of my wrist. So as you can see, it's ridiculous for me to wear something that's 44 or 45, and this is why I believe manufacturers should accommodate all their buyers and all their customers by making watches in more sizes. So this is 37, and on my wrist it looks great. Of course, it's gonna probably look ridiculous on someone who has huge wrist, but it's also down to the taste. So let's say a smaller wristed person might like a look of a bigger watch on them. I don't. I like when a watch is proportionate to my wrist size. So this is why I like it as it is. And this is why I will always prefer these older style Seiko 5s that are from 36 to 39 than the new ones that are from 40 to 47 or 48. So anyways, this pretty much covers everything about this watch. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And until the next video, bye.